Ethan and Lily Ward had spent years dreaming of a slower, quieter life, a place far away from the sirens, traffic, and endless noise of the city. After a decade in Chicago, both were exhausted. Ethan, an architect in his late 30s, had grown tired of deadlines and cold offices filled with glass and steel. Lily, a freelance illustrator, wanted to breathe again, to wake up to the sound of birds instead of car alarms. They often said to each other, "Let's just find somewhere small, somewhere real." So, in the spring of 2019, they did exactly that. After weeks of searching, they discovered a small town called Millbrook, hidden among rolling hills and forests in northern Michigan. It wasn't even on most maps. A sleepy place with fewer than 1,000 residents, where time seemed to move differently. There was a single main street with a diner, a hardware store, a post office, and an old-fashioned clock tower that hadn't chimed in years. To outsiders, it looked almost too peaceful, the kind of town that belonged on a postcard. Ethan and Lily fell in love with it immediately. They bought an old two-story farmhouse on the edge of town, pale yellow paint peeling from the walls, a porch swing that creaked in the wind, surrounded by tall pines and fields of wildflowers. Locals called it the Marston House, named after the couple who had owned it decades ago before mysteriously leaving in the middle of the night. But when Ethan asked about that story, most townspeople just smiled and said, "Old rumors. Don't worry about it." The Wards didn't. They were too busy making plans. Lily started painting again, inspired by the soft light that filtered through the trees. Ethan spent his days repairing the house, fixing the roof, clearing the overgrown garden, restoring old furniture. Neighbors often saw them walking hand in hand down the quiet main road, stopping at the diner for coffee or chatting with the elderly owner of the antique shop. By all accounts, they were happy, finally living the simple life they had wanted for so long. But beneath the calm surface of Millbrook, there was something different. Ethan noticed it first. The way conversations seemed to stop when he walked into the grocery store. The way people smiled politely, but their eyes didn't. The strange comments, "You're staying at that house?" or "Hope you like your nights quiet out there." At first, he brushed it off as small-town quirks. But as the weeks went by, Lily began to feel it too, an invisible weight that hung in the air, especially after sunset. They tried to ignore it. They invited their city friends to visit, but everyone was always too busy. They started keeping to themselves. In the evenings, they'd sit on the porch swing, drinking wine, listening to the forest come alive with crickets and owls. Sometimes they'd see a flicker of light deeper in the woods, maybe a campfire, maybe something else, and Ethan would joke, "Looks like we've got neighbors." But Millbrook didn't have any neighbors that far out. As autumn arrived, the days grew shorter, and the house seemed to settle deeper into silence. The couple wrote emails to family, saying how peaceful everything was, how they finally felt at home. But in Lily's last message to her sister, she added one strange sentence. "At night, it feels like someone's watching the house. Maybe it's just the forest." She didn't write again. The last known photo of Ethan and Lily was taken by a local on October 12, 2019. They were smiling, standing by the town's farmer's market, holding pumpkins. Nothing in that picture suggested fear or danger, or even the faintest hint that something was wrong. But something was. Because only a week later, on a quiet Sunday morning, their house was found wide open. The front door stood ajar, coffee still warm on the kitchen table, 2 plates set for breakfast. Lily's sketchbook lay on the couch, half-finished drawing of the forest outside. Ethan's jacket hung on the chair by the door. Their phones, wallets, and car were still there. But Ethan and Lily were gone. No signs of struggle, no footprints leading away. Just the creak of the porch swing swaying in the wind. And as the sheriff later said in his report, it was like they simply vanished into thin air. The people of Millbrook whispered quietly among themselves, glancing at the old Marston house whenever they passed. Some claimed to have heard screams that night. Others swore they saw lights flickering deep in the trees. But no one could agree on what had really happened. What everyone did agree on was this: Ethan and Lily Ward had come to Millbrook to start a new life. They never imagined it would be their last. For years, Ethan and Lily had talked about leaving the city. They would sit on their apartment balcony at night, staring at the glow of the skyline and dreaming aloud about quiet mornings, open fields, and a place where time didn't feel like an enemy. They were both tired, not of each other, but of everything else. The endless routine, the constant rush, the small talk that filled the silence between deadlines. When Lily's father passed away in early 2019, something shifted. She told Ethan one evening, her voice trembling but determined, "Life's too short to wait for peace. Let's just go find it." And for once, Ethan didn't hesitate. They sold their apartment, packed their belongings into a U-Haul, and said their goodbyes. Friends organized a small farewell dinner, laughter mixed with a strange kind of sadness. Everyone congratulated them, but some couldn't hide their confusion. A small town, in the middle of nowhere, they'd ask. Ethan would just smile. That's the point. In the last photo taken before they left Chicago, the two are standing by their moving truck, the city skyline blurred behind them. Lily is holding their cat, Miso, wrapped in a blanket. Ethan's arm is around her shoulders. They look excited, a little nervous, the way people always look before a new chapter begins. The drive to Millbrook took nearly 8 hours. They left at dawn, the highway still empty, the air cool and fresh. The world seemed to open up as the skyscrapers faded in the rearview mirror, replaced by stretches of green and gold. Lily played old songs from their college days, singing along off-key, laughing when Ethan joined in. For a while, it felt like they were the only people on Earth, two souls escaping the noise, chasing peace. They stopped for coffee at a roadside diner around noon. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, asked where they were headed. "Millbrook," Ethan said. The woman's smile faltered for a second. "That's quiet country," she said softly. "You folks sure about that?" Ethan chuckled. "That's exactly what we want." She didn't respond, just nodded, placed their check on the table, and said, "You take care out there." Back on the road, Lily teased him. "See? Even random waitresses think we're crazy." But as they drove deeper into rural Michigan, the light began to change. The air grew thicker, heavier somehow. The forest seemed endless, the trees forming dark arches over the winding road. Ethan tried to laugh it off, but he couldn't shake the image of that waitress's face, the way her smile had vanished when she'd heard the word Millbrook. By the time they reached the town's wooden sign, "Welcome to Millbrook, founded 1876, the sun was low, painting everything in shades of amber and red. The road curved through the main street, past small houses, a church, and the diner that would later become their favorite place for morning coffee. A few townsfolk waved politely, others just watched. Their new home waited at the end of a gravel road, the Marston house. It looked exactly as it had in the photos, maybe even better. The porch sagged slightly, the paint had long since faded, but the air around it felt still, untouched. Lily stepped out of the car and whispered, "It's perfect." That first night, they didn't unpack much. They opened a bottle of wine, sat on the porch, and listened to the crickets. The sky was impossibly clear, thousands of stars scattered like salt across black velvet. It felt magical, almost sacred. Ethan joked that it was the first night in years he could actually hear himself think. The following days were filled with energy and optimism. Ethan fixed the creaky stairs, Lily set up her studio in the attic, and every morning they'd walk into town for groceries or coffee. The locals were polite, though distant. A few asked what had brought them there, others just nodded without a word. There was an odd quietness about the place, a kind that felt both peaceful and watchful. One afternoon, while Lily was sketching the forest line behind the house, an elderly man walking his dog stopped by the gate. "You folks new here?" he asked. She smiled. "Just moved in last week." He looked past her, toward the house, then back at her. "Be careful at night," he said after a pause. "The woods don't like to be disturbed." Before she could ask what he meant, he tipped his hat and walked away. That night, Lily told Ethan about it. They laughed it off, chalking it up to small-town superstition. But the comment lingered, sitting between them in the quiet. They started to notice more odd things. Subtle, harmless at first. The sound of a car engine at 3 a.m., though no headlights passed the house. Footsteps on the porch, though no one was there. A neighbor who always stared but never waved. It was probably nothing. Small towns had their quirks. Still, when the wind howled through the trees, it sometimes sounded like a whisper, something almost human, calling from the darkness beyond the yard. But the Wards were happy, determined not to let fear spoil their new beginning. They told themselves they were just city people adjusting to silence, learning how to live without noise. As the narrator's voice might say, they had everything they'd ever wanted, a home, each other, and peace. But peace can hide many things, and when the first warning came, no one took it seriously. By mid-October, the Wards had fully settled into their new life in Millbrook. The house no longer felt foreign. The scent of Lily's morning coffee filled the kitchen, Ethan's tools clattered from the workshop, and in the evenings, warm light poured through the windows into the empty fields beyond. They'd started to think of the townspeople as distant but harmless, quiet souls who preferred keeping to themselves. But something about Millbrook's silence was different. It wasn't peaceful anymore, it was expectant. The first strange night began with a sound. Lily woke around 2:30 a.m. to what she thought was a knock. 3 slow taps on the porch railing, evenly spaced, deliberate. Ethan was asleep beside her. She held her breath, listening. Nothing. Just the creak of the old house and the sigh of wind through the trees. She told herself it was a branch, maybe an animal. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been standing just outside their window, listening. In the morning, she mentioned it casually over breakfast. Ethan smiled, half amused. "It's an old house, Lil. It makes noises." "Knocking noises," he shrugged. "Maybe the woods expanding in the cold. You're overthinking." She didn't push it, but that night she made sure to lock every door and window. 2 days later, Ethan had his own experience. He was in the shed behind the house, sorting through old boxes left by the previous owners. Among the dust and cobwebs, he found something strange. A tin box containing faded photographs and a leather-bound notebook. The photos were all of the same house, their house, taken decades earlier. In one of them, a family of 4 stood smiling on the porch. Someone had scratched out their faces. He opened the notebook, but most of the pages were blank. Only the first few had writing, cramped and shaky. "We shouldn't have come back. The woods remember." Ethan frowned, feeling a chill run down his spine. He brought it inside, planning to show Lily, but later that evening, when he went to retrieve it from the table, it was gone. He asked if she'd moved it. She hadn't even seen it. That night, the knocking returned. Louder this time, not on the porch, but against the wall near their bedroom. Ethan got up, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped outside. The cold bit at his skin as he scanned the darkness. Nothing moved except the trees swaying in the wind. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. Somewhere beyond the fence, something watched him, unseen, patient. When he came back inside, Lily was sitting upright in bed, pale. "What?" he whispered. "I heard footsteps," she said. "They went around the house, slow." Ethan sat beside her, pretending not to be afraid. "Probably animals," he said. But in the silence that followed, both of them knew he didn't believe it. The next morning, they tried to laugh it off again. They made pancakes, played music, filled the air with noise, anything to drown out the creeping unease that had begun to take root. When they walked into town that afternoon, the locals seemed unusually quiet. Conversation stopped as they entered the diner. People looked away. Finally, Ethan asked the waitress, the same woman from before, if something was wrong. She hesitated, wiping the counter with nervous hands. "You folks living in the old Marston place?" "Yes," Ethan said. Her eyes flicked toward the other customers, then back to him. "You ever hear things out there?" she asked quietly. Lily froze. "Like what?" The woman leaned in slightly. "Voices, footsteps, people calling your name when no one's around." Ethan forced a smile. "You're not exactly selling the town." But she didn't laugh. "I'm not joking. Folks say that house keeps what it's given." Before they could ask what she meant, the cook called her from the back, and the conversation was over. That night, the forest felt alive. The air was too still, the silence too loud. Around midnight, Lily swore she heard whispering outside her window, faint, like someone calling her name from a distance. "Lily, come out." She ran to wake Ethan, but when he checked, there was no one there. Just frost forming on the grass, the trees glistening under the moonlight. By the end of the week, the couple's nerves were frayed. They argued more, small things mostly, about lights left on, doors unlocked, tools missing. But beneath the surface, both felt something pressing down on them, as if the house itself was testing them. Then, one evening, they met someone new. A pair of hikers, Alex and Jenna, had stopped by after getting lost on the back roads. They were young, friendly, and grateful when Ethan offered them coffee. They stayed for an hour, chatting about the town and the surrounding woods. When Lily mentioned the strange noises, Jenna's expression changed. "You're not the first to hear them," she said quietly. "People online talk about it. Missing pets, lights in the forest, screams late at night. Some say it's the mines beneath the hills. Others—" she hesitated. "Others say it's something older." Before leaving, Alex joked that they should camp together one weekend. Lily smiled politely, but after they drove off, she turned to Ethan. "Did you see how she looked at the house? Like she knew something?" Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah, I saw it." That night, the knocking didn't come. The house was silent. But sometimes silence is worse. Lily lay awake until dawn, listening, waiting. And when the first light crept through the curtains, she realized she hadn't slept at all. The sense of peace that had once filled their new home was gone, replaced by something else. Something that watched, something that waited. By late October, the Ward's dream of quiet country life had become something else entirely. The air around the Marston house felt heavy, thick with the kind of silence that hums in your ears. Each night, the forest outside seemed to press closer, as if the trees themselves were leaning in to listen. The laughter that had once filled their evenings was gone, replaced by sharp whispers, uneasy glances, and sleepless nights. It started small. Ethan couldn't find his hammer one morning. Then Lily's sketchbook vanished, only to reappear 2 days later on the porch swing, pages soaked through with dew. Keys went missing. The kitchen clock stopped at 3:17 every night. The couple blamed themselves at first, exhaustion, distraction, forgetfulness. But deep down, they knew something wasn't right. Then came the footprints. One morning, after a cold, restless night, Lily stepped outside to find fresh prints in the mud leading from the tree line to their front door. Bare feet, small but human. The pattern stopped right at the porch, turned around, and disappeared back into the woods. Ethan wanted to take photos, but before he could grab his phone, a sudden gust of wind blew leaves across the ground, erasing the marks as if they'd never been there. That was when Lily began to dream. She told Ethan she saw people standing at the edge of the forest, not moving, not speaking, just watching. In her dreams, their faces were pale and blurred, and every time she tried to look closer, they melted into the trees. Ethan comforted her, insisting they were just nightmares, but he started to notice she was sleepwalking. Twice he woke to find her standing at the window, eyes open, whispering something he couldn't understand. When he touched her shoulder, she gasped as if waking from deep water. "I heard them," she said. "They want us to come outside." Ethan began to keep a flashlight beside the bed. By the third week, tension between them had reached a breaking point. They argued constantly about selling the house, about leaving, about whether any of this was even real. Ethan's face grew gaunt. Lily stopped painting altogether. She kept glancing toward the windows as if expecting someone, or something, to be standing there. On October 28th, a storm rolled in. Wind battered the old house, thunder cracked above the hills, and rain pounded the roof like fists. Power flickered, then died. In the flickering light of their candles, the shadows seemed alive, stretching, bending, whispering. At some point during the night, they heard it again, the knocking. Not gentle this time, loud, aggressive, coming from the back door. Ethan grabbed the flashlight, heart hammering in his chest. "Stay here," he told Lily, but she followed anyway. The sound came again, 3 sharp bangs. He flung the door open, shining the beam into the darkness. The rain was relentless, the forest a black wall beyond the yard. No one was there, but when he lowered the light, he saw something in the mud, a single handprint, not quite human. The fingers were too long, the palm too narrow, and beneath it, faintly visible, were words scratched into the wet earth. "Go back," Lily screamed. The flashlight slipped from Ethan's hand, the beam spinning wildly before landing on the woods, where, for the briefest second, 2 figures stood between the trees, still, watching. Then the light flickered out. They locked every door, pushed furniture against the windows, and sat together in silence until dawn. When morning came, the storm had passed, and the yard was undisturbed. No handprint, no footprints, nothing but the dripping of rain from the eaves. Ethan tried to rationalize it. Stress, exhaustion, tricks of the light. But his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He knew what he'd seen. That afternoon, they packed a few bags. Ethan wanted to drive to town, stay at a motel for the night, maybe even talk to the sheriff. But Lily refused. "If we leave now," she said, "we'll never be able to come back." "What are you talking about?" "They don't want us to leave." Her words terrified him more than the knocking ever had. That evening, as dusk fell, the couple sat apart, Lily by the window, Ethan pacing the floor. The storm clouds gathered again, swallowing the last of the sunlight. When he turned to ask if she was all right, he realized she was gone. The back door stood open. He grabbed a coat and a flashlight, running out into the cold. "Lily!" he shouted. His voice echoed off the trees. No answer, just the rustle of wind through the pines and the distant crack of thunder. He searched for nearly 2 hours, calling her name until his throat burned. Finally, near the edge of the woods, he saw a faint light, a lantern swaying gently between the trees. He ran toward it, but when he reached the spot, there was nothing. No light, no Lily, just a circle of disturbed leaves and the faint smell of smoke. When he finally stumbled back to the house, soaked and trembling, she was there, sitting on the couch, pale, barefoot, her hair dripping with rain. "Where were you?" he gasped. "I don't know," she whispered. "I just woke up outside." He held her close, feeling her heartbeat, cold and uneven against his chest. Neither of them spoke for the rest of the night. But from that moment on, Ethan knew something had changed. Lily no longer seemed entirely herself. She avoided the windows. She flinched at small noises. And when he asked what she'd seen in the woods, she only said one thing. "They don't want us to leave, Ethan. Not yet." The morning after Lily's strange night in the woods felt unreal, like the world had shifted a few inches out of place. Ethan woke to pale sunlight pouring through the curtains. For a moment, everything seemed normal. The house was quiet. Lily was still asleep beside him. But when he looked closer, her hands were streaked with mud, tiny pine needles tangled in her hair. He didn't wake her. He just sat on the edge of the bed, staring, trying to make sense of what was happening to them. Later that morning, Lily seemed distant, as though her thoughts were somewhere far away. She barely spoke. She made coffee, forgot to drink it, and spent hours standing at the window, watching the tree line. Ethan tried to stay calm. He convinced himself she'd been sleepwalking again. Trauma, stress, isolation. Nothing supernatural. Nothing that couldn't be explained. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. The sky grew darker that afternoon, the air thick with the promise of another storm. Clouds rolled in from the north, swallowing the horizon. Even the forest seemed to brace itself. Ethan decided they had to leave, tonight, no matter what. He packed their essentials, wallets, phones, a few clothes, Lily's medication, the cat carrier for Miso. He loaded the bags into the car, rain beginning to fall in slow, heavy drops. "Lily," he called from the doorway. "We're going. Now." She didn't answer. He found her sitting in the living room, the half-finished painting of the forest before her. The colors were smeared, distorted, a blur of dark shapes and long figures standing among the trees. "I can't," she whispered. "They won't let me." "Who won't let you?" he demanded. She turned toward him, eyes glassy, voice hollow. "The ones in the woods. They said we belong here now." Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. He grabbed her arm gently but firmly. "Lily, please, we're leaving." She didn't resist, just followed silently as thunder cracked overhead. Outside, the storm had arrived in full. Wind lashed through the pines, rain hammering the porch roof. Ethan helped Lily into the car, slammed the door shut, and turned the key. But the engine sputtered once, twice, and died. He tried again. Nothing. The dashboard flickered, the lights dimmed, and the car went silent. "Come on," he shouted, hitting the steering wheel. From the corner of his eye, he thought he saw movement, shapes between the trees, illuminated by lightning. For a fraction of a second, he saw faces, pale and still, watching from the forest edge. Then darkness again. "Ethan," Lily's voice was barely audible. "They're here." He looked at her. She was staring straight ahead, eyes wide, breath fogging the window. "We need to get back inside," he said quickly. They ran through the rain, slipping on the mud, bursting through the front door. The house groaned in the wind, the lights flickering. Somewhere upstairs, a door slammed on its own. Miso hissed from beneath the couch, fur bristling. "Call someone," Ethan said, grabbing his phone. But there was no signal, just a single bar flashing and vanishing. Outside, the wind howled like a scream. The temperature dropped sharply, their breath visible in the air. And then, a sound. Not the knocking this time. A low, rhythmic hum coming from the woods. Voices, dozens of them, rising and falling in unison, almost like chanting. Lily covered her ears. "Make it stop." Ethan grabbed a flashlight and moved toward the window. Through the rain-streaked glass, he saw flickering lights, lanterns moving slowly through the trees toward the house. Panic surged through him. He turned to Lily. "We're going out the back, now." She didn't move. "Lily," but she just stared at the window, tears cutting lines down her face. "It's too late." The front door rattled violently. Something, or someone, was pulling at it from outside. The windows shuddered. The chanting grew louder. Ethan grabbed her hand and pulled, but she broke free, stepping backward into the center of the room. "Lily, please." She looked at him one last time and whispered, "Don't follow me." Then she turned and ran, straight through the open doorway into the storm. Ethan shouted her name and chased after her, the flashlight beam slicing through sheets of rain. He caught a glimpse of her white nightgown flashing between the trees, then disappearing into the darkness. "Lily!" he screamed again, but the storm swallowed his voice. He searched for hours. The woods seemed endless, every direction the same. His flashlight flickered, died, then returned weakly. He was soaked, freezing, and shaking, but he couldn't stop. Every few minutes he thought he heard her voice. "Ethan, this way." Finally, near a clearing, he found something, her scarf tangled on a branch, and beside it, in the mud, 2 sets of footprints, one hers, one larger. There, they led deeper into the forest, then simply ended. He stood there, staring into the void of the trees, until the light from his flashlight began to fade. No one knows what happened next. When the sheriff arrived 2 days later, the storm had passed. The front door of the Marston house was wide open. The car sat in the driveway with the keys still in the ignition. Coffee cups were on the table, one overturned, its contents long since dried. Miso was gone. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no forced entry, just silence, and the faint smell of smoke from the woods behind the house. Search teams combed the area for weeks. Dogs picked up a scent that led into the forest, but it ended abruptly near the creek, as though the trail had been erased. Ethan and Lily Ward had vanished. No one saw them leave, no one heard them scream. And from that day forward, the old Marston house stood empty again, its porch swing creaking gently in the wind, waiting for whoever might come next. From that night on, the narrator's voice might say, no one ever saw Ethan or Lily Ward again. Their dream of peace became Millbrook's darkest mystery. The disappearance of Ethan and Lily Ward sent quiet shockwaves through Millbrook. For years, nothing truly happened in the town. No major crimes, no scandals, barely a police report worth filing. So, when the couple's empty house was discovered that October morning, doors unlocked, lights still on, breakfast half-eaten on the table, it felt like something had broken in the town's stillness. At first, people assumed they had left suddenly, maybe an argument, maybe a family emergency. But when Sheriff Alan Cooper walked through the house, he knew something was wrong. Everything looked frozen in time. There was no sign of packing, no indication of planning. Their suitcases still stood by the door, untouched. The cat was missing, but the carrier was inside. The bed was unmade. Lily's shoes were by the door, but her coat was gone. Ethan's phone lay on the nightstand, screen cracked, its last message unsent. "We're leaving tonight. If anything happens..." The rest of the text was blank. Within hours, a search was launched. Police cruisers lined the narrow road leading to the Marston property. Deputies, volunteers, and a K-9 unit from a neighboring county began sweeping the surrounding woods. Helicopters circled overhead, their spotlights cutting across the dark forest. Reporters showed up by evening, drawn by the eerie simplicity of the scene. A couple gone without a trace from a house that seemed to hold its breath. The first night of the search produced nothing. No footprints, no tire tracks, no signs of struggle. The following morning, a deputy found something near the creek, a single shoe, muddy and torn. It matched Lily's size. 100 yards away, searchers discovered Ethan's flashlight, its bulb shattered, lying in the grass. Dogs picked up a faint scent near the water, but it vanished abruptly at the tree line, as if the couple had simply stepped out of existence. Sheriff Cooper called in state investigators. Over the next week, Millbrook transformed. Helicopters thundered overhead. Posters with the Wards' faces appeared on telephone poles and storefronts. News vans parked outside the diner. Residents who had barely spoken to each other in years suddenly gathered on porches, whispering theories and fears. Everyone wanted answers. No one had them. Inside the house, forensic teams searched every inch. They dusted for prints, scanned for blood, checked phones, computers, mail. Nothing. No signs of forced entry, no hidden debts, no signs of mental instability or planned disappearance. Ethan's car was examined. No tampering, no mechanical failure. The only anomalies were small and strange. A window in the attic was found open, though it hadn't rained inside. In the dust beneath it, investigators found faint impressions. Not footprints exactly, but shallow, oval-shaped marks, as if someone had stood there barefoot, watching the yard below. On the kitchen counter, they found a page torn from a sketchbook. It showed the forest behind the house, drawn in careful detail, except among the trees. Dozens of faint white shapes were hidden, almost invisible until the page was tilted under the light. Lily's handwriting scrawled at the bottom. They stand between the trees. The discovery unsettled the team. One officer described a heavy feeling in the house, as though the air itself vibrated. Several reported hearing faint knocking while processing evidence. None of it made the official report. After 2 weeks, the active search was scaled back. The weather turned cold, the ground froze, and the volunteers began to fade away. Sheriff Cooper held a press conference outside the station, his voice steady but eyes weary. "We are continuing to follow all leads," he said. "At this time, we have no evidence of foul play, no confirmed sightings, and no reason to believe the couple left town voluntarily. Every possible explanation remains open." When asked if he thought they were still alive, he paused for a long moment before answering, "I don't know." In the weeks that followed, investigators from Lansing and even a few private detectives joined the case. They combed through security footage from gas stations and nearby highways. Nothing. Not a single trace of Ethan or Lily beyond October 29th. Then came the findings. A hunter 3 miles north of the Ward property discovered a torn piece of fabric snagged on a barbed wire fence, red flannel, matching Ethan's work shirt. Nearby, under a rotting log, searchers found a small tin box. Inside were photographs of the Marston house and an old, half-burned notebook. Most of the writing was unreadable, but a few words stood out clearly. "It begins when they dream." The sheriff refused to comment on the discovery, but unofficially, investigators couldn't determine who the items belonged to or how long they'd been there. The paper was damp but old, possibly decades old. By early winter, the official investigation had stalled. The police reports grew thinner, the press coverage quieter. The Ward's families, devastated and confused, stopped visiting Millbrook. A for sale sign was placed in front of the property, but quickly removed after no buyers came forward. Locals said the house didn't want new owners. Eventually, the sheriff's department labeled the case as inactive, but not everyone gave up. A handful of volunteers continued searching the woods on weekends. Amateur sleuths, hikers, even a few paranormal investigators drawn by the story. They mapped the area, logged coordinates, and claimed to hear things at night. Soft voices, faint lights, and the echo of knocking carried by the wind. No one ever found anything conclusive. And yet, every October, on the anniversary of their disappearance, someone leaves flowers on the porch of the Marston house. Always the same kind Lily loved to paint, white lilies and wild asters. No one has ever seen who leaves them. The police had their facts, the narrator might say, but the town had its own version of the truth, a version that would soon grow into legend. Time has a strange way of changing stories. Months passed after Ethan and Lily Ward vanished, and Millbrook quietly returned to its routine, or tried to. The police stopped searching. The press left, but the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was unease. It hung over the town like fog. At first, people avoided talking about it. The house at the end of Willow Creek Road became a ghost in conversation, referred to as that place. The Ward House, or simply there. But soon, whispers began to slip through the quiet, small, nervous sentences exchanged in the aisles of the grocery store or over cups of coffee at Miller's Diner. They weren't alone out there. Someone, or something, took them. That forest's always been cursed. By winter, the Ward's disappearance had become a story, one with no facts left to anchor it. Children dared each other to bike past the property at night. Teenagers whispered about seeing lights in the attic window. Someone claimed to have heard a woman's voice calling their name from the woods. Another swore they saw two figures standing in the yard just before dawn, motionless, facing the trees. When the snow melted in spring, a local hunter found strange wooden symbols nailed to trees behind the property. Crude circles, intersected by lines, their edges burned black. He took one down and brought it to Sheriff Cooper, who stared at it for a long time before quietly putting it in an evidence bag. It was never mentioned again. Soon, new versions of the story emerged. Some said Ethan and Lily had joined a cult. Others believed they stumbled upon something in the woods, something ancient that didn't want to be found. The rational explanations came too, and died just as quickly. Theories of runaway deaths, secret affairs, witness protection, but none fit the facts. No bank withdrawals, no hidden messages, no sign of departure. Just absence. Local radio hosts picked up the story next, framing it as one of Michigan's great unsolved mysteries. Paranormal podcasts devoted entire episodes to it. One claimed to have an interview with a former resident of Millbrook who said Lily had been seeing people who weren't there. Another insisted the couple had been documenting strange activity in the woods, whispers caught on tape, figures in the fog, before they disappeared. No one could verify any of it. Still, curiosity drew people in. By late summer, strangers began visiting Millbrook. Urban explorers, ghost hunters, self-styled mediums. They came with cameras and EMF readers, walking the same paths the search teams once had. Locals watched from behind curtains, shaking their heads. "It's not a story to play with," one elderly woman told a visiting reporter. "This town's got roots that don't want to be dug up." She refused to say more. By the second anniversary of the Ward's disappearance, the myth had fully replaced the memory. Online forums teemed with speculation. Someone posted a blurry photo of a shadow behind the Ward house window. Others shared supposed sightings, a couple hiking through the woods at dusk, a man and woman seen standing by the old gas station, their faces pale, eyes blank. Each sighting contradicted the next. None could be proven false, but none were real. Still, people believed. The house became a point of pilgrimage for the curious. Some came out of fascination, others for thrills. A few left terrified. One group of college students who spent a night camping nearby later reported hearing knocking on their car windows around 3 a.m. When they looked out, no one was there, but muddy handprints streaked the glass in the morning. Their story spread fast, and with each retelling, it changed. The knocks became whispers, the whispers became screams, the handprints turned bloody. By now, Millbrook had split into two kinds of people, those who wanted to forget and those who couldn't let go. Even Sheriff Cooper, retired and living 3 towns over, couldn't escape it. Once a year, journalists still called him, asking for comments. His answer was always the same: "I don't know what happened to them, and maybe it's better we don't." Still, something in his tone hinted that he'd seen more than he'd ever admit. As the years went by, locals began telling new residents the story as a kind of warning. "Don't walk the creek road after dark," they'd say, "and if you hear someone calling your name from the trees, don't answer." The legend took on a life of its own. People started claiming that the Ward house lights flickered on at night, even though the power had long been disconnected. Others said the mailbox sometimes filled with fresh letters, though no one had delivered them. And then there was the sound, faint knocking heard by hikers near the woods. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, like someone tapping on glass. Each October, on the anniversary, the story would surface again. Online threads reignited, podcasts revived, videos reposted. The headline was always the same: the couple who moved to a small town and vanished. No one realized it yet, but something, or someone, was about to reopen the case. Because just when the legend began to fade, Millbrook was about to remember. In stories like these, the narrator might say, truth doesn't disappear, it waits, buried in the noise, hidden in the myths, and sometimes it finds a way back. It had been nearly 5 years since Ethan and Lily Ward vanished. By then, their story was old news, the kind of tale locals told to newcomers, half for fun, half as a warning. The house at the edge of Willow Creek Road stood empty, its paint cracked, its roof sagging, ivy curling across the porch. A for sale sign leaned crooked in the yard, bleached pale by years of sun and rain. But in the spring of the 5th year, when Millbrook had almost forgotten, something surfaced. It began with a storm. Heavy rain rolled over the town one night in April, flooding the lower roads and swelling the creeks behind the Ward property. By morning, debris had washed downstream: branches, leaves, a child's toy, and something else. A rusted metal box, dented and sealed with tape, lodged itself against a broken fence post near the Miller farm. A boy found it while walking his dog. He brought it home, thinking it was junk. His father opened it. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, faded but unmistakable. The first showed the Marston house, taken from across the road. The second, the same house, but the front door was open. In the third, a blurred figure stood by the window, a woman, half turned toward the camera. The police were called immediately. Sheriff Cooper had retired by then, but he returned to assist the investigation. He sat quietly at the station that afternoon, studying each photo under a magnifying glass. Some were clearly old, probably taken months before the couple vanished, but others seemed newer. One of the final pictures made his hand tremble. It showed the same kitchen where he'd once stood 5 years earlier, the breakfast plates still on the table. Only this time there was something else in the frame. A dark figure standing in the hallway, barely visible except for the reflection of its eyes in the light. Experts were called to analyze the images. The negatives were gone, but the film type suggested they'd been shot on a camera model discontinued in the 1990s. No fingerprints were found on the box, but one partial print on the inside lid matched Lily Ward. Suddenly, the case was open again. The police resealed the house and brought in forensic teams. Drones mapped the area around the creek. Divers were sent into the deeper pools formed by the flooding. Within days, another discovery surfaced: a small, waterlogged notebook wrapped in plastic, caught in the roots of an old oak tree not far from the Ward property. The first few pages were ruined by water, but some writing remained legible. The handwriting matched Lily's. "We hear them at night again. Ethan says it's just the wind, but I know it's not. They move closer each time. The forest isn't empty. Sometimes I think it's listening." The later pages turned darker, shorter sentences, unsteady lines. Ethan saw one. "We can't leave. The car won't start. If anyone finds this, don't follow the lights." The notebook was sent to a lab for preservation, but the last few pages were too damaged to read. Still, it was enough to reignite everything. Reporters returned to Millbrook. News vans lined Main Street. Social media lit up with theories, photos, and speculation. The legend of the missing couple was alive again. Only now there was evidence. Podcasts ran new episodes. YouTube channels posted breakdowns of the photographs, zooming into the shadows, highlighting shapes that might or might not have been there. Every pixel was examined, every word of the journal debated. Some said the photos proved that the couple had never left, that they'd been trapped, maybe even alive for some time after the disappearance. Others claimed the images were planted, part of an elaborate hoax, maybe by someone in town. But there was one picture that no one could explain. It showed the backyard of the Ward house at night. The trees stood like black teeth against the moonlight, and between them, faintly but clearly visible, were figures, dozens of them. Pale, motionless, facing the camera. Investigators called it a trick of exposure, double lighting, reflections, anything but what it appeared to be. But people online didn't believe that. Forensic teams returned to the woods with advanced ground-penetrating radar. They found something unusual near the property line, a shallow depression in the earth covered in years of leaves and moss. When excavated, it revealed remnants of a collapsed structure, wooden beams, fragments of glass, and beneath them, several small objects wrapped in fabric. Inside one of the bundles, they found a wedding ring engraved with the initials LW. It was Lily's, and yet there were no remains. The discovery divided the town. Some believed it proved the couple had died there. Others argued it only deepened the mystery. If they were gone, where were they? Who buried the ring? Sheriff Cooper refused to speculate publicly, but those close to him said he looked shaken, like he'd seen something in those woods that still haunted him. By midsummer, the photos and notebook had been sent to state archives, but whispers continued. Some residents claimed to see people walking near the property again. Others said lights flickered in the attic just before storms. And once more, on the anniversary of their disappearance, the flowers appeared. White lilies and asters, perfectly arranged on the porch. This time, however, someone noticed something different. Beneath the bouquet was a note written in faded ink. "We tried to leave. It wasn't signed." Sometimes, the narrator might say softly, the past doesn't rest. It waits, buried in soil and silence, until the storm uncovers it. The new discoveries, the photos, the notebook, the ring, reignited the mystery like gasoline on dying embers. The official investigation resumed quietly that summer, led by a new sheriff, Dana Whitmore, who had grown up in Millbrook. She had been 16 when the Wards vanished, and like everyone her age, she'd spent years haunted by the story. Now, standing inside the decaying house on Willow Creek Road, she was determined to find answers. The forensics team began with the timeline. Based on the notebook, the couple had begun hearing strange noises around a week before their disappearance. The last entry, "If anyone finds this, don't follow the lights," was dated October 28th. Neighbors reported seeing the Ward's porch light flicker late that same night. Around 1 a.m., a truck driver passing along the old road claimed he'd seen two figures walking near the tree line, one holding a lantern. He assumed they were hikers or night fishermen. No one ever followed up on that sighting. Now, with new forensic technology, investigators examined the photos again. Under infrared scanning, faint details emerged, a blurred outline on one of the back porch shots. It resembled Ethan's jacket, but something was off. The proportions of the shape beside him were distorted, elongated, almost humanoid, but wrong, as though stretched by movement the camera couldn't capture. Still, nothing in the photos could prove what had happened that night. So Sheriff Whitmore went deeper. She re-interviewed old witnesses, locals who had avoided speaking years earlier. That's when new details surfaced. Mrs. Graham, who lived 2 houses down, recalled waking up around 2:30 a.m. to what she described as a strange hum, like electricity buzzing through the air. Her power flickered off for several seconds, then came back. When she looked out the window, she saw faint lights moving through the woods. Not flashlights, she said, but floating, like orbs. Another witness, a farmer named Frank Dole, told investigators he heard screaming that same night, carried across the fields. Not panicked, but desperate, like someone shouting into the wind. He hadn't reported it at the time, assuming it was coyotes. Slowly, a sequence began to form. The wards had likely gone into the forest sometime after midnight. Whether chasing the lights mentioned in Lily's journal or fleeing from them, no one could say. But the evidence suggested movement toward the creek, where both the flashlight and Lily's shoe were found days later. Forensic experts, analyzing soil samples from the ring's burial site, confirmed that the ground had been disturbed around 5 years ago, roughly the same time as the disappearance, meaning someone or something had returned afterward. Then came the biggest revelation. During the digital enhancement of one of the undeveloped negatives found in the metal box, technicians noticed something invisible to the naked eye. Faint lines scratched into the film itself. Enlarged, they formed words. They wanted us to stay. No one could explain who carved it or when. But the words aligned eerily with Lily's notebook entries. As investigators reconstructed the timeline, they pieced together a chilling possibility. Sometime between 12:45 and 2:30 a.m. on October 29th, Ethan and Lily left their home, possibly under duress, possibly following something into the forest. There was no sign of struggle, suggesting they left willingly, or were lured. The last activity on Ethan's phone was a message draft saved at 12:47 a.m. The incomplete line still haunted investigators. "We're leaving tonight. If anything happens..." Nothing followed. Search dogs once again scoured the woods, this time guided by new GPS mapping. In one low, marshy area about half a mile from the house, they found something unexpected. A piece of wood shaped like a cross, blackened at the ends as if burned, and carved with symbols matching those found years earlier on the trees. It was driven into the ground beside a shallow pool of water. Beneath it, buried in mud, they found a small, rusted camera tripod. The final photos from that tripod's memory card were corrupted, but one partial image loaded: the back of Ethan's jacket, faintly visible under moonlight. And behind him, something tall, motionless, standing between the trees. By this point, even the most skeptical investigators began to question the rational explanation. Sheriff Whitmore, though careful not to fuel the town's folklore, admitted in an interview, "Something happened out there that night, something we can't fully explain. Whether it was human or not, I don't know, but I think they saw something they weren't supposed to see." Experts later speculated the wards might have stumbled upon a hidden ritual site, possibly remnants of an old cult once rumored to exist in northern Michigan decades ago. The symbols, the burned wood, the silence of the locals, it all fit patterns seen in other unsolved rural disappearances, but nothing concrete ever tied the case to any group. The reconstruction ended where it began, with questions, not answers. Still, the picture was clearer now. The wards had been terrified in their final days. They believed something was watching them. On the night they vanished, they followed or were drawn into the woods, possibly by the mysterious lights mentioned in Lily's journal. What happened afterward, whether a tragic accident, a crime, or something beyond comprehension, remained unknown. But for the first time in years, the mystery felt alive again. The final report concluded with a line that lingered long after the files were closed. "The events of October 29th cannot be fully explained by known evidence. The forest holds more than silence." That was the official ending. But unofficially, locals had their own version. They said the couple never left the woods, not completely. Some claimed to see them wandering near the creek during storms. Others said they'd appear in reflections, two blurred faces behind the window glass. And sometimes, on quiet nights, when the wind moves through the pines, you can hear a faint whisper near the old Marston house. "We tried to leave." By the time the investigation closed for the second time, nearly a decade had passed since Ethan and Lily Ward vanished from their quiet home in Millbrook. The official files filled 2 boxes: photographs, maps, soil samples, hundreds of pages of interviews and reports. But none of it told the full story. None of it explained what happened that night in October when two people simply stepped out of their lives and into silence. The case remained unsolved. The forest remained quiet. And life in Millbrook moved on, at least on the surface. The Ward house was finally boarded up, the paint peeled away in long, curling strips. Ivy climbed the porch railings like veins. The mailbox rusted shut. Sometimes the wind slammed the loose shutters against the siding, echoing through the empty rooms like a heartbeat that refused to stop. For years, no one wanted to buy it. Realtors avoided the listing. Teenagers dared each other to break in, but rarely lasted more than a few minutes inside. They said the air felt wrong, heavy, charged, like static before a storm. Some swore they heard faint music playing upstairs. Others claimed they saw light under the attic door. Most people dismissed those stories, but still, no one stayed long after dark. Ethan and Lily's families eventually stopped visiting. Too many years, too many unanswered questions. Lily's sister, in one rare interview, said, "I used to dream about her. She was standing in the woods, calling my name. But when I tried to reach her, she'd disappear into the trees. After a while, I stopped dreaming. Maybe that's what letting go means." The townsfolk spoke less and less about the couple, though the legend never died completely. It became a whisper woven into Millbrook's identity, the story everyone knew but no one understood. In the years that followed, documentaries and podcasts revived the mystery again and again. Each time, theories multiplied: cults, possession, parallel dimensions, government experiments, psychological breakdowns. Everyone wanted a rational answer, something that would make the story make sense. But some stories refused to fit inside reason. In 2024, a true crime filmmaker was granted permission to shoot inside the Ward house for a documentary titled The Vanishing of Millbrook. The crew set up cameras and recorded for 3 nights. On the second night, just past 3 a.m., one of the cameras in the living room captured a faint knocking. 3 soft, deliberate taps from somewhere inside the walls. Moments later, the power flickered. When the lights returned, the crew found that every door in the house, including the front and attic doors, was standing wide open. No one had moved them. The documentary never released that footage. The director later called it too disturbing and too personal. But those who worked on the project said it changed the way they looked at the story. One of them wrote online, "It's not just what happened to them that scares me, it's the feeling that it's still happening." In the official record, the case remains unsolved, presumed deceased. But the unofficial version, the one whispered among locals, passed from porch to porch, told by candlelight during storms, is different. They say Ethan and Lily never truly left, that they walk the forest on nights when the fog is thick and the moonlight catches between the trees. That if you listen closely near the creek, you can hear footsteps behind you, though you'll never see who's there. And they say that each October, someone, or something, still leaves flowers on the porch. White lilies and asters, arranged perfectly, always fresh. No one ever sees who brings them. Some believe it's Lily's sister keeping her memory alive. Others think it's Ethan's ghost, still waiting for her to come home. But a few, the ones who've heard the whispers in the woods, say the flowers aren't a memorial. They're a warning. In her final statement before retiring, Sheriff Dana Whitmore wrote, "Every town has its ghosts. Ours just have names." And that's how the story of Ethan and Lily Ward ends. Not with answers, but with echoes. Their disappearance left behind a vacuum, one that filled with myth, fear, and fascination. They became symbols of something no one could explain, the thin veil between the world we know and the one that watches quietly beyond it. The camera slowly pans up the trees, their branches swaying in the wind. The house fades into shadow. The screen darkens. Then, a single knock, soft, steady, close. And in the final seconds, as the narrator's voice returns, low and measured, the words linger like a shiver. They only wanted a quiet life. But in Millbrook, silence has a way of answering back,